Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator. I'm all about capturing and curating career and life stories as a meaningful way to celebrate a milestone moment like a big O birthday, anniversary, retirement, or graduation. And I'm at my best when curating photo books that move your memories from the basement or your phone or your computer to the coffee table, giving you and your family and friends access to these treasured memories for years to come. I also love curating and capturing life and career stories through this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? It's a series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing Ann Wagner, who is the executive director of Ann Wagner Live, which is a speaking and coaching company. So welcome, Ann.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And this is going to be so fun. I love it when people have a creative title like that, the executive director of Ann Wagner Live. So I can't wait to get into what your coaching and speaking is all about. Before we jump into today's interview, let's hear a word from our sponsor, Life Story Curator, a testimonial from one of their very happy clients.
Oh my gosh, if you're considering hiring Kathy Lawless to do a book for you, you need to do it. My name is Ann DuPont, and I'm Chair Emeritus of a nonprofit that's been based in Denver called the Leadership Investment. And after 20 plus years of being in business, we decided we had to celebrate and commemorate all of the great work we'd done and the impact we'd had in the Denver community. So we hired Kathy Lawless and Life Story Curator to help us do exactly that. And I've got to tell you, the result has been simply outstanding. We went into it with a little bit of fear, thinking, is this going to be too much work? Can we really take this on? And Kathy just made it absolutely painless. She was fun. She was creative. She broke the work into bite-sized pieces that we could really take hold of and get done. And she just made it a lot of fun. We had a lot of laughter along the way. And the feedback from the members of our organization, from the staff, the community, the volunteers, has simply been outstanding. It has really done quite a remarkable job of capturing the essence of everything we achieved over 20 years. So if you're thinking about doing something like this for your organization, for your career, for your family, I would highly recommend it, and I would absolutely say that Kathy Lawless and Life Story Curator is the person for you.
So Ann, tell us where you grew up, what part of the country or what part of the world, and a little bit about your family dynamics in terms of how many siblings, where you are in the birth order, and how you think both shapes you, where you grew up and then also your birth order.
Okay, I'd be happy to. I grew up pretty much half time in St. Louis, Missouri, till I was about 11, and then through high school graduation in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I am the oldest. I have a younger brother, younger sister, and I would say typical oldest, like responsible, having that responsibility for the other siblings. I kind of always felt that, and grew up very focused on my studies, very type A personality. Something that I've tried to overcome here later in my life. But no, I'm thankful to my parents, both of whom are gone now, but I'm thankful to both of them that they provided a safe place for me to grow up. They provided an area where I could study, and pursue what I wanted to do, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But they also were kind of, I think, drove me that you can always be better. That situation.
Yeah. Well, I think as oldest, the pressure that's on, but also I think there's that freedom too, that you've there's no one in front of you. I've heard several of the oldest say that there's no one in front of me. So I got to create whatever I wanted, and I never thought anything would stop me. Whereas I'm a middle child, and I was like, oh, I always saw someone in front and what they did. And then I was like, oh, maybe I don't want to try that. I guess I had that luxury, but also that was a part of my growing up. So what did you do for activities? Were you into sports or music, theater?
Actually, my father, I think, wanted a son firstborn because he took me to a lot of baseball games, and I grew up. I played competitive softball. I played varsity softball as a freshman in high school. I loved baseball. I loved softball. So very sports oriented. And if you grew up in Pittsburgh about the time I did, you also had to love football. The Pittsburgh Steelers were very big. And I sung in a choir. I sung in a high school choir, and we were very good. We actually competed around the state of Pennsylvania, and multiple people in the choir when I was there, went on to become professional singers. One even became the professor for Josh Groban for his short time at Carnegie Mellon. So it was a really good choir, had a lot of fun, but mainly focused on my studies at that point in my life.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So both sports and music. Awesome. Okay. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. Introvert, extrovert, or ambivert?
Well, nobody would believe it now, but I was so introverted, I couldn't even call a department store to find out what hours they were open. I kind of had a phobia of calling people. Very introverted, very studious, that type of thing. I pretty much have done a 180 since then because I had to. I realized, and this is flashing forward a little bit, but by the time I was in my early 20s, I thought I'll never be successful if I can't use the telephone, if I can't reach out to people and be comfortable. So I kind of had to force myself to do it.
Wow, that is interesting and good to know. And I can't wait to get further into your story and find out more about some of the tipping points and what pushed you over the edge there to get out of your comfort zone. Okay, on the fun meter, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato and 5 being the life of the party, where do you put yourself?
Currently now, I would say, I don't know if I'm the life of the party, but I love to meet people. I love to socialize. I love to lift people up. So I guess that would be a 5. You know, again, I've come a long way. And I think that's what life is. We're all progressing along. We're all trying to find our way and to grow. So, but I'm not a party animal per se. But if I'm invited to a party, or if I'm having a party, I want to make sure everybody feels comfortable around me. I just want to lift everybody else up and have a great time.
Awesome. Okay. So maybe the focus isn't on you, it's on everybody having a great time and everybody being the life of the party, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, if you're ever having a party,
you're invited.
So on the risk meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low risk taker, 5 being high risk taker, where do you put yourself?
That's an interesting question. I would say, again, I've done a 180 from when I was younger. I was very afraid of change, afraid of taking any kind of risk. Now I'm very spiritual, and I have a lot more faith and a lot more trust, basically, than I had before. And so I guess you would call it a risk taker. I don't do risky things like, say rock climbing when I have no skills to rock climb, something like that. But as far as being not afraid to go with the flow, I think that's the key in life, is what I've learned. I used to be everything had to be in a particular way. I had to control everything. Control freak. Not anymore. Now I'm like, because control is an illusion anyway. It's what I've learned. And so it's much easier on yourself and all the people around you if you can kind of go with the flow. Even if something that you perceive as negative happens, something will come of it. It will be all right if you don't fight it too badly. That's what I've learned.
Oh, great lessons there. And it is interesting how risk taking does evolve for each of us, right? In terms of how we might do that either in the personal life with being, some people like that adrenaline thing, the rock climbing or the skydiving, etc. And then in their professional life may or may not be the same level of risk takers. So
right.
We're all, like you said, work in progress. We're work in progress. Okay. Well, Ann, I can't wait to hear more about your story. And when we met, we met for lunch, I think, and then it was a 2-hour lunch, I think. And we could have kept going all afternoon. So, but today I will manage our time well. But tell us, if you would, what it's like being the executive director of Ann Wagner Live. So tell us what you do, who your typical clients are, and then we'll get into how did I get here?
Okay. Well, with me, I mean, the title is one thing, but really Ann Wagner Live is a mission to me. And specifically, you have to understand a little bit of the background that I had suffered from a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, I had kind of poor health. As you can imagine, a lot of stress growing up, kind of as I described in my childhood, a lot of it self-imposed. And so what I do at Ann Wagner Live is, one, I like to speak on hope to people that have that maybe have suicidal ideation, things like that, that you can come through that, you can get out of that black hole, come through that tunnel, into the light, so to speak. More specifically, what I do, because I'm familiar with it, and I can go into this more, but I was the main breadwinner in my family. And so I was always in high pressure jobs, things like that. So I work with women in those same high pressure, high profile jobs to help them achieve their success without the stress, to really enjoy your life and be able to move forward, not doing it just because you're caught up in something that you can't control anymore, really taking charge of your own life.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. That's a great overview, and you've described it so well. So I love that it's a mission and a title, and it's what you do. I mean, it's all about you. So how did I get here? So let's go back to junior high and high school when you were, a young person. What were you thinking your career was going to be?
Well, when I was really young, I had a medical accident. I was out on a bike and I broke my leg in a couple of places, and I was only 7. And so I had this, I was taken to the emergency room, and actually they didn't know, it didn't appear anything was broken just to a lay person. There was no swelling or anything like that or bruising, but it was broken. And I remember sitting in the emergency room and seeing people that just were really in a bad way, looked a lot worse than I looked. And I thought, I have to do something about this, 7 years old, right? And that I decided I was going to be a surgeon at a very early age. And so I worked very hard. Really, that was my trajectory, even through college most of the time. And I had planned to go to medical school. I went to Cornell University, which was pretty brutal. If you were pre-med, they were there to weed you out, not to necessarily, with all due respect, and I have a lot of respect for the university, but the program at that time when I attended was to weed people out of that program. And so I found it, and it was probably not the school to go to, as I was prone to high stress anyway. So ultimately, I did take the MCATs, did well, but my grades, had I gone to a lesser school, I might have had higher grades, but just over a 3.0 doesn't cut it at Cornell University to get into medical school. And you know what, it was a growing experience, because I had to learn that my student stature is not who I am as an individual. It doesn't mean I'm not a smart person. I'm a very smart person, that type of thing. So that's what I started out to be. And then it kind of morphed into, when I graduated, I ultimately got into sales. My father was a salesperson, and I really knew nothing about it, but I kind of had a knack for it, so to speak. And ultimately, I ended up in IT sales for Oracle at one point, and healthcare, IT and healthcare equipment sales for a cardiology company. And that's where I spent the majority of my career till fairly recently, when I've branched out on my own with Ann Wagner Live.
Yeah. Wow. So you're going medical school, or, and so how did you get into the sales? I mean, you mentioned that your dad was in sales, so maybe it was in your DNA, but that seems very unusual to go into sales in technology. I get the part where you were sales for medical devices, but how did the whole technology thing pan out?
Well, actually, Oracle was somewhere it was in the middle of that. So I didn't go to Oracle first. I think it was still that I had a passion for healthcare, and I really didn't know what to do, honestly. Since I had planned for being a surgeon my whole life, Kathy. I had no plan. My first job out of college actually was working at Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh as a technician, because I had done research and teaching at Cornell, and I applied that. I worked in the pathology lab at a hospital. So I knew my heart was kind of around healthcare and helping people. The sales part of it, I knew I also had to make a living, and I knew you could make a living in sales. So it was kind of a juxtaposition, so to speak. I didn't know, as we don't know how successful we're going to be, you know, when we start something, but I figured it was the environment I wanted to be in, healthcare sales, and it had its share of bumps along the way. I mean, it really did. I'm not sure I would have made the same decision, but it did shape who I am today. So.
Well, you know, you mentioned earlier about being such an introvert and being shy. So sales seems kind of contrary to that. So was there a breakthrough when you were in college then? Is that where the breakthrough kind of happened about, you know, I really do need to be reaching out to people and talking with people?
You know, I think so. I guess I would say I had a couple of Me Too instances, unfortunately, growing up, but it's like, I'm not standing for this. I'm going to stand up for myself. I think that's where it started. It wasn't in college. It was kind of as a young person out of, you know, graduation, hitting the real world and things like that. And just suffice it to say, I mean, what's done is done, that type of thing. But I learned early that I think not a lot of was expected of me and my family, especially by my mother. She wanted me to take typing so I could be a secretary, you know, if I didn't get married, right? And I'm like, really? That's the only expectation you had for me? So,
so your aspirations of being a surgeon were far exceeded what she had.
Oh, they didn't. Neither of my parents got that. They said, why do you want to be a doctor? Neither of us like doctors. And I'm like, really?
Wow. Yeah, because it's always been, I guess in my family, it was such a respected field. And, you know, and it took, you know, the smartest and the most dedicated and of course, people who could work with the human body, obviously. I was always like, squeamish. I was very squeamish. So medical wasn't in my future.
Well, I would chalk it up to the fact, I think as a parent myself, and I have 2 children, very different kids. And I understand perfectly. We're like a mirror of each other. And the other one, not so much, but I've learned sometimes the child, you know, you have to learn to love them for who they are and what they want to do and things like that. And I think my parents, I was so different. I was a girl who loved sports. And so, matter of fact, I went to professional baseball umpire school after graduation from college, because at that point, this is going back a little bit before I got into sales, but my father said to me, he said, okay, you're not going to go to medical school. What do you want to do with your life? And I said, I want to be a professional baseball umpire. So I was the only female in a class of 127. I had the time of my life for 5 weeks, and still not many women ever go through that program. I was trained really well, and I still do. I still umpire amateur ball. So that was another way to start expressing myself, you know, that, hey, when you're in charge of a ball game, you say what you mean, you call the game, and people may not like it, but you're in charge. You know, that's how the game moves forward. So that was another way that I kind of found my voice, I would say.
Yeah. Interesting. You know, I hadn't thought about, I played volleyball in high school and junior high, but I didn't play in college. And then I went on to play in adult leagues here in Colorado at a pretty competitive level. And we had to get certified. Your team had to have 2 certified referees. And so I was always certified as a referee, being on the top of the stand or on the floor. And I hadn't thought about that. It does give you a voice, you know, the leadership that came with that. I never really put that on my resume or anything, right? I just always kind of, well, I play volleyball and someone on the team's got to do it. And then once you did it, it was easier to maintain the credential than to go through it. So, you know, as a team member, with the 2 of us who were certified, were always just the ones that went through it, because it was just easier to stay certified. And yeah, interesting. But you're right, it is about voice, because you did have to stand up. You had to call the game. You had to stand up when you made a call, because you know, it was I was referring women's, men's, and, I said women and co-ed. I never refer the men because I didn't really go to those tournaments, but yeah, but the men on the co-ed could be a little bit, well, the women could be too. Could be a little fussy. You had to, make sure that you set the stage well and did it well, so you didn't get, like, accused or all the controversy. That was the thing you wanted to avoid always, was controversy, right?
There's one other interesting point to that, Kathy, if I could add, and that is that at the time, even when I went into sales, there were not many into medical sales, there were not many female role models. And when I worked at Oracle, my whole team was all male, that type of thing. So I always felt like men were it was a perception that men were just dominating everything I did. So it was kind of like my payback when I got out on the baseball field. I'm like, no, I'm in charge. I didn't have to say that. I mean, I come out professional, I'm dressed professionally, I call a great game, have a great strike zone, but I felt like, yes, I am in charge here. and so that's just a little anecdote, but I couldn't resist throwing it in there that, that also helped me, because it's hard. It's hard, as a woman, it's hard in business. It can be. I mean, I'm not, my adult daughters now, they're in their 20s, and it's a little bit different. It's a lot more, there's a lot more women in the field than there used to be. But anyway, that's what I did one of the things I did to kind of regain my voice.
Yeah. Well, your daughters also had you as a role model, and you didn't have you as a role model, so you were really forging your own way. I was very fortunate to have some great female role models early in my career. Because that whole notion of, if you can see it, you can be it, and be it in the way that feels more comfortable for you. I think I did kind of really conform so early in my career about, that it was all about how I was expected to act and be. And, that I remember one of my first learnings about being an authentic leader. I'm like, what is this? Of course I'm authentic. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I mean, I have integrity, but I'm not really being who I am. I'm not letting that shine through very much. And it was a big aha moment for me. So.
Well, I don't think we're alone in that. I think especially a lot of women, to find out, the expectation, if they're an earner for the family, the breadwinner, so to speak, or if, that they may have grown up with all of these different expectations of how should I be. And it's not, you end up at the end of or later in your life, it's not how does somebody want me to be? It's how do I want to be?
Yeah. Yeah.
How can I be? And we just don't ask ourselves that question early enough, in my opinion.
Yeah. Good point. Who am I being? Wasn't what I was thinking about. It was more about, what role do I want? And I don't know. I was tied up at the end, the identity of the role and me, not me first. And then what roles do I want what would be interesting for me? I kind of had it backwards, I guess.
I totally get that.
Most of us, right? You hear it so often about you're kind of wrapped up in the identity, and then all of a sudden it changes. The role changes, and you're like, whoa! Can be a pretty big shock.
Or if you lose your job, men too. Let's not just limit this to women, but men too. That can be a loss of identity. I mean, it's a huge thing. If you've poured your life and your breath into something, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and what do I do? That type of thing.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that, you felt these roles were, sounds like maybe it was a good fit to get into sales once you got into sales, but it was high pressure, and then you were kind of prone to anxiety and depression. So how did you kind of manage through that? Plus you have a family now. I mean, it sounds like, a lot was really riding on your success and being out there.
Right. It definitely was. Just the family dynamics, because of various things. I was the only breadwinner for a lot of my marriage, and also had to afford a nanny, and I had little kids, and I was traveling all over the country. And so it was a prime, just a prime petri dish environment for stress as far as it went. And although I really do like sales and I love account management, what the problem was, I didn't know how to deal with the stress. I didn't even think about dealing with it. I just simply forced it down inside. And I think a lot of people do compartmentalize and say, I'm just not going to deal with it. I have to survive. I'm going to push this down as far as I can. And I was very successful at what I did. Like I said, I really enjoyed a lot of the sales, but quotas and things got kind of out of control. And, and I remember at one point I had a manager, and we were on our way into an appointment at a hospital, and she said, Ann, you look like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. And I said, yeah, just about, or something like that. So
Certainly felt that way,
I
right?
didn't deal with it, Kathy. That's the answer. I didn't deal with it until it became something I had to deal with, later in my life. And that's, I know we'll get into that of how did I get here. But I'm a much different person now. Now I feel like I could handle any job that I'm qualified for that you throw at me, because I handle it differently. I know how to handle myself. And so I look for the joy every day. I never did that before. I was on such a hamster wheel. I felt like the money was too good. I can't get out of this because I have to take care of my little kids. I have to afford the house. I have to do everything like that. And whether that was partially self-imposed, mainly it wasn't. It was pretty true. And I just didn't know of a good exit strategy. So
you just kept going as you were. Did you then end up in some leadership roles on the sales teams, or were you primarily an individual contributor?
Pretty much an individual contributor, because I felt like I was managing a nanny and a family from long distance. I'm like, I've got my team. I said, I have enough on my plate. I don't need to. I love to be a mentor to others, don't get me wrong, but I really didn't have an interest in, rising up the ranks of the company or anything like that. I know people that do, and that's fine if that's I think that was a smart move on my part. I think that would have been even more crushing.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, and a lot of times, when you are successful in sales, that's the first thought is, oh, we need to promote them. And other times it's like, no, don't, keep that salesperson really, creating that engine of revenue and sales. Don't, because a lot of times you put them in management and then that same thing can't happen. But other times you can then replicate, and train people, mentor them to, be as successful as you. So what was kind of the pivot point then? How did you end up exiting, or did the exit happen for you? Sometimes, as you mentioned, you get laid off, you get fired, there's, weird circumstances happen.
I think the turning point came around 2010. I had multiple orthopedic problems, and it caused me to, I couldn't work. I just couldn't work. And I felt like I couldn't keep up, that type of thing. And my marriage also kind of was on a downhill path. And so slightly, I got over the orthopedic things, and very difficult time, a huge loss to our income. In fact, it nearly caused us to lose our house, because my husband had just started a job, and it was really tough. We saved it and things like that, but it was a tough time. And then I ended up divorcing, and not long after that, the biggest thing that happened was I had a stroke, and which was very interesting because I really had no risk factors for stroke, but they believe it was a clot from a previous surgery that might have released. Anyway, I had a stroke. I went into a coma. They determined there was a hole in my heart. It was this cascading of events. And if you can imagine, because I'd had kind of poor mental health for sure, and some poor physical health, I was like, why is this just not over? Seriously, God, you know what I'm saying? I was just done. And I tell people that it was probably simultaneously the best and the worst thing that ever happened to me. I didn't know that at the time it seemed like the worst. I also had an out-of-body experience, but that's kind of peripheral to this story. So anyway, I knew then that, well, I didn't know anything. I figured when I was just trying
I
to
love that. I realized I didn't know anything.
yeah, I really didn't know anything. It's like, what do I do now? You know, where do I go from here? And so I kind of thought that maybe if I started meditation, I might mitigate some of the problems that I had from the stroke, and increase the neuroplasticity in my brain. So I started that, and a friend who was a very spiritual friend, she said, why don't you just start saying some affirmations like, I am healthy. I told her, you're crazy, right? Are you kidding me? I'm laid out here and, da-da-da-da-da-da. And she said, what do you have to lose? And so I was like, she was right. And so I was in a job at the time where I had that flexibility. I had a real supportive boss, and he helped me get through this period. His support, and in other words, taking the burden of the job off of me, so to speak. So I did the meditation, and you got to understand, I grew up in an era, and my parents thought meditation was against God. You didn't do it. It was kind of woo-woo type of thing. But no, I'm going to do this, and it. Ultimately, that's where I am today. But at the time, I did the meditation, and I noticed I kept saying those affirmations. She said, do it with all this energy. I am healthy. And I'm like, I felt so stupid. And I felt like a liar. Really. I felt like I wasn't being truthful.
Yeah.
Right? But I kept doing it, and about I'd say a year to a year and a half later, one, my physical health was great. And two, in my mind, I realized that, hey, I really believe that I am healthy. And then three, which I didn't count on at all the anxiety, all the depression just kind of seemed to melt away. And I'm like, how is this possible? Because I had gone for help all my life, to get medications, to get counseling, to do whatever. And I'm like, wait a minute. All of a sudden, I have this just a night and day breakthrough to me, because I had lived at such a low vibrational level where everything was, like I said, living at the bottom of a black pit, always being in despair type. And now I not only didn't I feel that, and I thought in the last 5 years, I don't even go back to that, even with COVID. And that's what I've been testing my strategy. Like, what did I do exactly? And what do I continue to do to keep me in this great, really positive state? And then I can remember when I was about 20 years old and in college and suffering badly from depression, I kind of bargained with God, like, if you ever get me through this, I will write a book, I will speak, I will do whatever it takes. And, not 40 years later, but if you consider adolescence, probably the whole time was 40 years, I got through it. And that's what I want to do. And so working with people to show them that if I can, save even one life, I mean, to me, I don't know that I haven't had anybody say, you saved my life yet. Not that it's not for my ego or anything like that, but I think far too many people listen to the news. They've gotten through COVID somehow, and their mental health may be at a breaking point. And if I can show them that, hey, there is hope to get through this, and there's strategies that you can use so you don't have to feel, in fact, you can feel the opposite. You can find happiness in about any situation. You just have to know how to look for it. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with my business.
Wow. So it sounds like you started this practice of meditation and affirmations and just kept with it. But then one day you kind of wake up going, wait a minute, I'm really different and better now. I mean, was there like a journaling moment, or, you were talking to a friend or a coach? It just seems like, because sometimes we do make changes and we don't pay attention to when we are now different. Sometimes it's just, now it's the new me. So it's just me. So how that's very interesting that you really noticed that you were marketably different.
I think noticing it wasn't like a journaling moment per se, but what I will say is that I never knew that you could really change your thought patterns appreciably. that never even occurred to me. We grow up with thought patterns that we've, heard things that we've heard all our lives from our parents, our teachers, our siblings, our friends, and they kind of become implanted on our subconscious. And that's part of what I teach. But I think what it was is when I was saying, I am healthy, at some point I realized I'm not lying to myself. I believe I am healthy. I really believe it. And so whereas I believed I was lying to myself before, there really is, you can really shift your consciousness. And in my heart, I feel like this is the greatest discovery I made in my entire lifetime, that no matter what we were before, as long as we're not 6 foot under now, we can change. What do you want to do? Do you want to be, a better spouse? Do you want to have more money? What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? And then let's set our sights on it. And it's a matter of focusing your energy, because we are an energy-based universe. And there's other techniques, like I say, that I used, and I've tried them out the last 5 years before I thought I'd even attempt trying to teach this to other people, to make sure, hey, am I missing something? Kind of like a scientist, is anything I say going to hurt somebody? That's the thing I don't want to do. No, and none of that. And in fact, when I compare my techniques, then, if you listen to podcasts, or you listen to YouTube videos, or you'll find very similar people that are saying the same things. And sometimes it just takes the right teacher to be able. I didn't have that teacher, but I found that the techniques I was using were, oh, this is really working. And there's other things I use too. But now, it's such a fresh outlook on life, because that things don't have to be the way they've always been. I think a majority of people believe that if they've always been this way, they will always continue to be this way. Nothing could be farther from the truth. You can start today and you can change something. Will it be overnight? Probably not. Okay. But if it's important to you, it can be done. There's a way to slow your mind, and there's a way to retrain it so that you can have what you want in your lifetime. Because after all, we're only here one lifetime. So might as well do it now.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Mindset, so important. That little voice. I remember I had a leadership class. Gosh, it was probably 15 years ago now. And in the leadership program, it was more of a program than a class, but it was all about you as a character as a leader, not you as skills. It wasn't a skill-based program at all. And we had to pick a project for ourselves that would make us 2% better. So basically the philosophy was, you're already amazing, great leaders already, but how could you be just 2% better? So it's called our 2% project. And my project was to turn down the volume of that critical voice in my head, and really just turn down that volume. And I remember, so I do have a marketable or noticeable change from the end of that program, because I had to get up and talk about my 2% project and what I did over that course, through the course and through other things. But then also, I guess, even after that course, then with different programs and training that I've been in, that voice has always been, sometimes the volume gets high and I turn it down, and then sometimes I reprogram it, and then all of a sudden it comes back up. I'm like, where did that come from again? It's been a while, but it is important though to recognize where you can, that you don't have to remain in that negative zone. You don't have to remain in that critical zone. Your thoughts do not control you. Your thoughts are not you. So yeah, it's pretty powerful when you get to that point.
That's probably the most important technique you could have ever taught yourself, Kathy, in my opinion. It's one of the most important things I've ever taught myself. So turn down the negative voice in your head, and how to do that, or to eliminate it most of the time completely, even better.
Yeah. One of the tricks I used to use was that recognizing that the voice is there and going, okay, I hear you, voice, and I appreciate that you have feedback here, but not right now. We'll get, we don't need that right now. I'm going to shift over here. And but it's actually, you got to stop, right? You have to acknowledge that it's happening. And, so that's part of being conscious of it. So interesting. Well, Ann, this is, just fascinating. I got to tell you, I could probably just keep going, but we do need to start wrapping up. So you've really explained well what you do and how you do it. So tell us a little bit. So I have a couple wrap-up questions. Tell us about what you think has served you best through your career when you look back.
Probably persistence, not only to achieve, to be a working mom, that type of thing, but persistence to get through all of the negative stuff that's happened in my life, and just to not give up. And I hope other people have that mentality too, that no matter how bad it gets, just be persistent.
Yeah, that you sounds like for most of your career in life, that's what you did. You were just making sure that you were showing up and delivering what you needed to do. But then there was a point that your health actually kind of suffered, maybe from the stress and pressure that you were under.
True. I think that, I mean, I feel very thankful that I'm still here today. This is all gravy time to me. I mean, it could have been over about 7 or 8 years ago when the stroke and everything happened. So, anything that I can do now is all happy. But I think persistence is the thing that, even when it's all going wrong, move forward.
Yeah, I like that persistence. Okay, and then the last wrap-up question then is, any words of wisdom that were impactful for you, in something maybe someone shared with you that really made a change for you, or some you really kind of struck you, or that maybe you use for yourself or you use with your clients?
Not something I necessarily use yet with my clients, but going back to what we discussed earlier, that always trying to fit somebody else's version of you. There is a quote by Oscar Wilde that, be yourself, everybody else is already taken. I have that on a t-shirt. I literally wear that t-shirt in the summer because, one, because other people are amused by it, but two, it reminds me of my worth, that no matter what I want to do, that I'm worthy by virtue of just being a spiritual human on this planet. So I hope everybody that might be listening keeps that in mind. Be yourself. Do what really drives you.
Oh, I love that. I do love that quote too, by the way. It's one of those things that you see and you're just like, wow, how does people come up with these quotes, right? They're so impactful and meaningful. And it's like, I don't know that I've ever said anything that is worth repeating in that way.
Well, did you know that Oscar Wilde was a poet, I think in the 1800s, and he was a gay man, persecuted endlessly for it. So it's very interesting that he had the courage to say something like that.
Yeah, because that obviously took a lot of courage back then. So Ann, tell us about what you have going on with your speaking and your coaching right now. I think when we were talking earlier, you've got a free offer that our listeners could take advantage of if they would like.
I do. I have it's a free PDF, and it's 5 things that you can do every day to prioritize your mental health. I use it, highly recommend it to other people. All you have to do is email me for it. If you're interested in my coaching classes or speaking, you can find out, you can ask about that as well, but just email me at awagner@annwagnerlive.com. That's ANNWAGNERLIVE.com. And, I just wish good things for everybody that's listening.
Well, thank you. That is awesome. I love that 5 things you can do for your mental health. We talk about physical fitness, right? And there's all these fitness clubs all around, that you see pop up everywhere. But what are we doing for our mental health? And I'm so glad that there is more of a focus now on taking care of your mental health, and the promotions and the public service announcements and all of that about mental health, because that drives so much of, people's lives and the ability to thrive and survive. So thank you for all the work that you do and how you're going to make a difference in the world. So
thank you, Kathy.
All righty. Well, listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below and you'll be alerted when other interviews are published. And if you have any questions for me or for Ann, then you can find it on my website, lifestorycurator.com, which is where I'll post this interview in the blog section. I'll also post Ann's social media information if you were inspired today and would like to get a hold of her or want to take advantage of the free offer. I know I want to get it because I think if you can just look at one or two little things that you can do a day, like those affirmations. I have affirmation calendars and I have different quotes that I get, and it does make a difference. It starts the day in a way that we can be intentional and programming our life for the day versus letting that little voice or that little, those thoughts kind of creep in there. So thank you, Ann, for sharing your story and for doing the work that you're doing. And I guess on that note, I'll say just stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing the stories. Have a great day.